Hello. Welcome to the 11th chapter of the book of 1 Corinthians. If I look a little older than I did in the 10th chapter of the book of Corinthians, it's because there is a space of a year in between. For some reason, I felt it in myself to develop a book called Entities of the Book of Revelation. I spent almost a year, and here it is right here. I hope you can see it. It goes through the book of Revelation and has all the entities categorized like locust, leopard, sheep, serpent, belt, all types of things, and they're all put together in a category so you can follow it with different types of entities, such as the entity, number entities, place entities, plural living entities, somatic entities, and it goes on and on. It's a couple hundred pages. And then, as long as I mentioned in the book, that's available on our website, apostolicbible.com. There's another book, English Derivatives from the Greek New Testament, I did maybe 20 years ago, and it has words in it that it explains the pronunciation. It gives the Greek word, the number, and the English derivative, such as diatrivo is number 1304, and we get the word diatribe from that. And other words, dicazo, dichotomeo, a dichotomy, a division into two contradictory opinions. And all the yellow highlighted words in this video, as you see here, like right there, they are in that book. So you can look it up and then find English derivatives, and it helps you, I believe, remember the word a little bit better. So now we'll begin in the first verse. It begins and it says, become mimics of me. Mimite as a mimic, a mimi is where it comes from. It's almost a transliteration where it has the same letters, at least the first four. As even I of Christ. Now, it's sort of strange that he would say that. I think it would be like, well, wouldn't you be a mimic of Christ instead of Paul? But he uses that, and then he goes on, he says, but I praise you, Adelphi, brothers, that in all things you have remembrance of me, and hold the traditions as I delivered to you. So these people that he is writing to, the Corinthians from Ephesus, he praises them in some things, and other things he condemns them. But I want you to know that the Christ is the head of every man. Andros, android. We get the word manly type of a word. The head of every man is the Christos, Christ, Jesus. And the head, the kephali, cephalic, has to do with the head in medicine. The head of the gynekos, the woman, is the anir, is the man. Gyne, we have misogyny, gynecology, the gyne is the man, and the head of Christ is God. The words here of woman and man, as I mentioned many places, can also be used, depending on the context, with gyne as a wife or a woman. The same with anir, it could be a man or a husband. It depends on the context. Here, I would like to think that it was a wife and a husband, but later we'll see that it goes beyond that, and so it'd be pretty difficult to say that that's all it meant. I'm sure a lot of women today listening to this, or maybe in the future, have a hard time with that. And we go in verse 16 over here, Paul says it's a custom. These customs that he's bringing out but this is not a custom. This is with the headship. It's the hierarchy that God has. A hierarchy sort of like an army has. are the government has a hierarchy with in this case, a president or a king, and then royalty has the nobles and so forth as they go on down. And some churches have a hierarchy, as the Roman Catholic Church with the Pope and the Monsignor, the bishops, the cardinals, so forth. And he continues, every man praying or prophesying, having anything on his head, disgraces his own head. Well, this is what he's saying, and in those days it would be a disgrace. Having the long hair, basically, is what he's talking about, is disgrace, but yet having praying or prophesying with anything on the head disgraces his own head. Prophetevon is a prophecy. The word comes from that. And every woman praying or prophesying with uncovered head disgraces her own head. Prophetevusa, again, prophesying, so women can prophesy. And in the church, but there was a lot of it in other places has to do with the husband and the wife. A wife couldn't take over the duties of a husband if the husband was there. And but here he's talking about women praying and with an uncovered head. I'm sure it's talking about in church, maybe not, but when I was, I'm 75, when I was younger, back in the 1950s, women wore hats when they went to church. Hardly ever saw a woman without a hat. Now, I can't remember if the young girls had hats or not. I don't think they did, but the older women all had these hats that they wore, and basically women wore hats in the all before that, or had their heads covered. Many areas of the world, women still have their head covered, and this is 2016. The Muslim women have their heads covered, and I've seen Indian women, and I'm not really sure about Buddhists. I don't know a whole lot about them, but many cultures of women have their heads covered. But in the 1960s, with the feminist movement, the group of women who started the feminist movement were very anti-Christian. They had one thing in common, and that was to change the way things were with women at the time, and promising that they should have equal wages in these different things. And now they do have equal wages because none of the men are working. And so the things that happened have changed, and so women today, hearing this, might have a hard time with this and saying, well, I can't go back to the way it was. But I know some people that the women do cover their heads. They're Mennonites. Strange that, not strange, but the grandparents didn't, and they're really strong Christians, but yet their grandchildren took up that tradition, and the girls have their heads covered. He continues, for a man indeed ought not to be covered of the head. Now that doesn't mean outside in the bad weather, and this is talking about in the assembly, I believe, being an image and glory of God. But a woman is a glory of man. So the hierarchy is showing, headship is that God, Jesus, man, and then the woman. For not is a man from out of woman, but a woman is from out of man. He makes this argument. For even man was not created on account of the woman, but the woman on account of the man. He's talking about, of course, Adam and Eve. Adam was created first, and then Eve to be a helpmate and so forth. But of this, the women ought, 3:4, to have authority upon the head. So the custom of those people with the authority shows that they had authority above them. And this was, it says, because of the angels. And I exactly not sure, it could be messengers, but I think it's truly the angels, and somehow ties into what angels see and how they look at humans. And the angels saw the women in the resurrection when they went to the tomb, and probably these women had their heads covered. Maybe it was to tell the difference between a male and a female. I don't know, for an angel. Furthermore, neither is a man separate from a woman. So now he's bringing the equality of the two as far as how God sees us. Nor a woman separate from man in the Lord. Now that's in the Lord. Without the Lord, a lot of places women are very subservient. But in Christianity, they're not. Nothing like in other religions. For as the woman is from out of the man, so also the man is through the woman, that is, through childbirth. Eve came from the man. God took a bone and created the woman. But all things are from out of God. So basically, God is in charge of everything and devising this hierarchy. He says, among you yourselves judge. Is it becoming for an uncovered woman to pray to God? I'm not a woman. I don't know how a woman feels if they have this feeling of being more or less having their head uncovered and feeling some type of negative feeling. I don't know. Or does not even nature itself teach you that a man indeed, if he should have long hair, it is a dishonor to him? Well, that's interesting because long hair, you see a lot of pictures in the Middle Ages and different times in history where men did have long hair. In fact, it has Jesus in many pictures as having long hair. Now, it's a dishonor to him. I don't have long hair. I have never had very long hair, just over my ears. But I can tell you one thing, as a man, I hate having my hair that long. I go to get a haircut when my hair starts just to get a little bit long, over an inch or so, and it just drives me crazy, scratching my ear and so forth. And so I go and have a haircut, and I feel great. It's like, wow, this is just a wonderful feeling. Women, I doubt if they have that. So there's something in us that distinguishes the difference between the sexes and having the hair. Now, I've seen a lot of women today that cut their hair real short, and a lot of men have their hair long. But such it was as he describes here in the time of the New Testament. But a woman, if she should have long hair, it is a glory to her. For the hair, the comb is a comet. We have that word comet, where it's a tail of a comet. It's like a hair. For the hair of the head instead of a wrap is given to her. But if anyone thinks to be contentious, we do not have such a custom, nor the assemblies of God, the ecclesiae. We have the iglesia, church, in Spanish, comes from that word. But in this, exhorting, I do not praise you. Now he's changing it. For you do not, 3, come together for the better, but for the worse. So now he's going to their gathering together as far as the ecclesia, the church. The subject is being changed. For first, indeed, a proton, in your coming together in assembly, ecclesia, I hear of schismata, akuo, acoustics is a derivative, and the schisma, we have a split, schisma. I hear of splits existing among you, and he mentioned it earlier, but some saying, I'm for Paul, I'm Apollos, I'm for Peter, and so forth. And partly I believe it. For must sex even be among you? Now there's a little bit of a different word here. Instead of a splits, it's aresis. We have the heresy as a word that comes from that, the derivative, that the ones approved should become apparent among you. And heresy, the sects, we have sectarianism in churches called denominations. Today, sad because a lot of denominations put a wall around their denomination. They set up certain borders. This is what we do, and we're not going to change. And they don't. Other ones have different rules and ways they do things. They're sectarian. In your coming together then in the same place, is it not to eat the Lord's Supper? Now here he's bringing in the Lord's Supper. It was already taking place, the remembrance of the people at this early of a stage after the resurrection of Christ, where he had the Last Supper with his disciples, the upper room. But each first takes his own supper in the eating, and one hungers and another is intoxicated. So they were just all confused. Some people were coming in, maybe, I don't know how many people were in these churches, sounds like quite a few, and some of them started grabbing the food and eating it. I remember going to a potluck at the church I went to the last time. It was actually a funeral, and the potluck, the food afterwards, and I watched this one man, and he was just sitting there looking at the food, waiting for the prayer to, the prayer hadn't even begun, to wait for it, and so nobody was praying, and so he just got up and started getting the food, and then somebody said, well, we better pray, and then he's sitting there with a plate full of food looking like a fool, and then they said the prayer, and then everybody came and got in line. So one person takes his own, and then another person is hungry, like me. I was like, well, I would have liked to have been there too, but I mean, this is not the right thing to do. And another is intoxicated. Methie. We have the methyl alcohol, comes from that, the methyl, intoxicated. So they were drinking wine. In the 10th chapter, I was mentioning how drinking beer was something that I have done and do. Not very much, very seldom, but these people were being intoxicated, so they weren't just drinking one here and there. For do you not have Ikeas, houses, ecology, as a derivative, for the eating and drinking? Or do you disdain the assembly of God and disgrace the ones not having? I remember seeing this movie, Brother, Sun, Sister Moon, fantastic movie on the life of St. Francis of Assisi. And St. Francis went out and became like a beggar and rebuilt this old church that had been, went into a ruin. And all the people in town, they were very wealthy in Assisi, and they all sat with these beautiful robes on, and all the poor people stood in the back, while these people sat on these throne-like chairs. And the people in the back were in rags, and they're watching. And then when Francis rebuilt that ruined church, all the poor people went there. And in the movie, they're holding animals, and still wearing their tattered clothes. And then it goes back to the church with all the rich people, and they're all sitting there without anybody to show off their new clothes, and they're all in misery with their riches. It's a good movie, Brother, Sun, Sister Moon. Shall I praise you in this? I do not praise. For I received from the Lord what also I delivered up to you, that the Lord Jesus, in the nikti, the nocturnal night, in which he was delivered up, took bread. And this is in the upper room. When Judas Iscariot left, and having given thanks, he broke it and said, take, eat. This is my body, the one being broken for you. It's interesting, because I've been in some churches where they, different ways that they have the Lord's Supper. And the Catholic Church, apparently in the olden days, not in the 50s or so, I think the people were given a wafer, but they weren't able to drink the wine. And then the Lutheran church that I grew up in, we had got a wafer and the taste of the wine, but it wasn't broken. And the whole purpose of this thing is remember his broken body. Not exactly broken, just the body that perished, because it says not a bone in his body was broken, but the idea of his being put on the cross and dying. And he says, this do in my remembrance. So it's in remembrance. Now you get into the Catholics and Lutherans, they get this transubstantiation where the body actually becomes the bread and the blood becomes the wine and all this. But I grew up in that, but then later when I came back to the Lord after a hiatus of 13 years, I saw that the church I went to was a remembrance. to remember God. It's not some type of a hocus pocus type of a thing that some man stands up there and turns something into something else. But the purpose is to remember the death of Christ. Likewise, also the poterion. I don't have that highlighted, but it should be. We have the pot, comes from that. Potable, another word, derivatives. The cup after having supper, saying, Jesus says, this cup is a new covenant. Kaini diatheke. That's what we're reading here in the new covenant at the beginning of the Apostolic Bible. In the New Testament it says Kaini diatheke, is in my blood. Imati, hemo, haima. This do as often as you should drink in my remembrance. So again, Jesus is bringing out remembering him. He wants us to remember his death. For as often as you should eat this bread and should drink this cup, the death of the Lord you announce, until of whichever time he should come. So this is the important thing, is to announce the death of Christ. And when he talks about the death, I believe it's more than just the death. It's the whole process of the death and the resurrection. If it was just the death, that's no big thing. But the resurrection was what made it special. So that whoever should eat this bread or should drink the cup of the Lord unworthily will be liable of the body and blood of the Lord. Well, so if you're just going in when there are people are taking this what's called the Eucharist, we'll see later how that word is used, but you don't believe in Jesus or anything, you're just doing it, then somehow he's saying that you'll be liable of the body, or if you're in a condition of willfully sinning and doing things against God, that's a lot of the sins that are mentioned that people that are doing will not enter the kingdom of heaven, then it doesn't do any good to go in front of, it's almost like going in front of a policeman and jumping up and down or doing something, making fun of him and ridiculing him, and he doesn't deserve that, and Jesus doesn't deserve it if it's unworthily. But let a man prove himself, and thus let him eat from out of the bread and drink from out of the cup. So prove, do it with your conviction that this is a remembrance of what Jesus has, and his suffering and dying for us in resurrection, and forgiveness of sins that comes with it, and the deliverance. For the one eating and drinking unworthily eats and drinks a judgment to himself, not discriminating the body of the Lord. So I'm not exactly sure how he's saying exactly here, but it's certainly not something that's good, because the judgment will be against you for doing that. Because of this, many among you are weak and ill, and have a fit amount have gone to sleep. So the importance of having the right attitude when you're taking the Eucharist, communion, the Lord's Supper. For if we should not examine ourselves, for if we examine ourselves, 3, we should not be judged. So if we do it right, then we won't be judged. But otherwise, if we do it making fun or whatever, then there will be a judgment. It's going to be, I don't know how severe, but you will be liable for a judgment of doing something basically ridiculing God in the way he had in the suffering of Christ. But being judged by the Lord, we are corrected, that we should not be condemned with the cosmos, the world. So we are offered the forgiveness of sins and the correction that we need to change in our lives so that we will not be condemned. So that, my brothers, coming together for the eating, let us look out for one another. So we come together and we're doing it for a purpose of remembrance. But if anyone hungers, well, let him eat in his own house, that you should not come together for judgment. And the rest, whenever I should come, I shall set in order. So if you're hungering if this is you're going there to scarf the food down like that man that I saw, then don't. You're better off not going. Going with the right attitude to the Eucharist is the right way to do it. And anything else concerning that, Paul says he will come back and he'll set it in order. So, in the next chapter 12, we go into a further away from the physical realm of the churches into the spiritual realm, and I hope you'll join us, and God bless.